That's Jonah for you. He was a prophet, yes, chosen by God for a special task, but underneath the title, he was just like us. He had his good days and his bad days. He knew what God wanted, but sometimes his own feelings got in the way. Imagine being asked to do something really big, something that scares you a little, or maybe a lot. Jonah wasn't a plaster saint. He was flesh and blood, full of the same worries and wobbles that we all experience. He wasn't always eager to please, nor was he consistently brave. Jonah was a man who could be stubborn. If he had an idea in his head, it was hard to shift it. Perhaps he was a bit grumpy at times too. We all know those days, don't we? When the world seems a bit gray and our patience is thin. God had a plan for Jonah, a very important mission. It wasn't a small request like popping to the shops for a pint of milk. It was a life-changing, nation-altering kind of task. And this task involved people Jonah really didn't like, people he thought were, quite frankly, the enemy. So when God called, Jonah's first reaction wasn't a cheerful, "Yes, Lord, here I am." Instead, his heart probably did a little jump of alarm, or perhaps a big one. His mind might have raced with all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. Why him? Why? It's like being asked by your boss to lead a project you feel completely unprepared for, or worse, to go and help out your biggest competitor, wishing them success. Jonah was relatable because he was flawed. He wasn't a perfect servant, ready to obey without question. He was human, and his humanity, with all its imperfections, is what makes his story so powerful, so relevant to us even today, in 2025. So, God speaks. The call comes. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Simple enough instructions, you might think. But for Jonah, these words landed like a heavy weight. Nineveh was not a friendly place for an Israelite prophet. It was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, known for its cruelty and might. Going there felt like walking into the lion's den. Jonah's immediate response wasn't driven by faith, but by a very human emotion, fear, and perhaps a touch of resentment too. Why should help? God's instruction was crystal clear. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it. But for Jonah, those words echoed with dread. Nineveh wasn't just any city. It was the heart of the Assyrian Empire, a name that struck fear into the hearts of its neighbors, including Jonah's own people, Israel. Think of it in today's terms. Imagine being asked to go to the capital of a nation widely considered hostile, a place known for its aggressive policies and military strength, and deliver a message of condemnation. It would take an immense amount of courage, a courage Jonah found himself lacking at that moment. The very thought of Nineveh likely conjured images of danger and hostility. These were the people who had oppressed others, who were known for their ruthlessness. To go there as a lone prophet, proclaiming their doom, seemed like a suicide mission. Jonah's fear was understandable, wasn't it? He might have feared for his life, naturally. He might have feared failure. What if they laughed at him, or worse? He might even have feared their repentance, because deep down, perhaps he didn't want them to be saved. They were the enemy, after all. It's a tough spot when your personal feelings clash so strongly with the divine command. So what did Jonah do? Did he pray for strength? Did he ask God for reassurance? No. Jonah decided on a different course of action altogether. He decided to run. He went down to Joppa, a port city, and found a ship heading to Tarshish. Tarshish was in the opposite direction of Nineveh, as far away as he could possibly get in the known world. It was like booking a one-way ticket to the other side of the planet to avoid a difficult phone call. He paid his fare, got on board, and sailed away, hoping to flee from the presence of the Lord. He thought distance might make the divine call fade. This act of rebellion tells us so much about Jonah, and perhaps about ourselves too. How often do we try to avoid difficult tasks, uncomfortable conversations, or callings that stretch us beyond our comfort zone? Jonah's solution was avoidance, a physical escape from a spiritual responsibility. He preferred the rocking of a ship heading to an unknown land over the daunting path of obedience. Fear had taken the wheel, and it was steering him far from God's intended destination. But as Jonah was about to discover, you can't really outrun God, especially when he has a plan for you. The journey to Tarshish was about to get very complicated. Jonah was on the ship, sailing away from Joppa, heading towards Tarshish. He probably felt a sense of relief, at least for a little while. He had made his choice. He was escaping the uncomfortable, the frightening, the unwanted task. Perhaps he imagined a new life in Tarshish, far from God's demands, far from the wicked Ninevites. But trying to escape the creator of the universe is like a child thinking they can hide by simply closing their eyes. God is not so easily eluded. And so, the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. The storm wasn't just a bit of bad weather. It was a tempest of epic proportions. These were experienced sailors, men who knew the sea, its moods, and its dangers. Yet this storm terrified them. They had likely weathered many gales before, but this was different. It felt targeted, supernatural. The waves crashed over the deck, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the sturdy ship creaked and groaned as if it were about to be torn apart. The sailors did everything they could. They threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship, desperately trying to save themselves and their vessel. They cried out to their own gods, each man praying to whichever deity he believed might offer salvation. And where was Jonah amidst all this chaos and fear? He had gone down into the hold of the ship, lay down, and was fast asleep. Can you imagine? She is being battered, men are fearing for their lives, and Jonah is snoozing. Perhaps it was the sleep of exhaustion, the emotional toll of his decision. Or maybe it was the sleep of denial, a subconscious attempt to block out the reality of his disobedience and its consequences. It's like someone ignoring a blaring fire alarm, hoping it will just stop on its own. His attempt to flee was leading not to peace, but to greater peril, not just for himself, but for everyone on that ship. The captain of the ship eventually found him. He was probably astonished and likely quite angry to find a passenger sleeping through such a life-threatening ordeal. "How can you sleep?" he exclaimed. "Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, so that we will not perish." The captain, a pagan, was urging the prophet of the one true God to pray. The irony is thick. Jonah, the man running from God, was now being told by a desperate sailor to seek divine help. His private rebellion was having very public and very dangerous consequences. The sea itself seemed to be reflecting the turmoil in Jonah's soul. The storm raged on, relentless and terrifying. The sailors, having tried everything they knew, turned to a more ancient method to find the cause of their misfortune. They said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." In their world, casting lots was a way of seeking divine insight, of finding the person responsible for angering the gods. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. All eyes turned to him. The man who had tried to become invisible was now the very center of attention, the focal point of their fear and their questions. The sailors, desperate for answers, began to question him intensely. "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" The questions came thick and fast. They needed to understand who this man was, this stranger, whose presence had seemingly brought a divine wrath upon them. Jonah could no longer hide. The storm outside was matched by the storm of inquiry within the ship. The time for evasion was over. He had to face the music, the terrifying symphony of the wind and waves that his disobedience had orchestrated. With a heavy heart, Jonah confessed. "I am a Hebrew," he told them, "and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." He then admitted the crucial part. "I am fleeing from the presence of the Lord." Imagine the sailors' reaction. They were already terrified of the storm. Now they learned they had on board a man who was running from the very God who controlled the sea they were battling. Their fear intensified. "What is this you have done?" they cried. They understood the gravity of offending such a powerful deity. Jonah's personal problem had become their life-threatening crisis. The sailors, now knowing the cause, pressed Jonah further. "What shall we do to you, that the sea may quieten down for us?" The storm was growing worse. They weren't seeking revenge, but a solution. They wanted the sea to be calm again. Jonah, burdened by his guilt and seeing the innocent sailors suffering because of him, knew what had to be done. He told them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quieten down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." It was a moment of stark realization and costly self-sacrifice, admitting his fault and offering a way out for the others. Section 5, The Belly of the Deep, a prayer from an unlikely place. Despite Jonah's instruction to be thrown overboard, the sailors initially hesitated. These were hardy men, but they were also humane. They tried their best to row back to land to save everyone, including the prophet who had brought this trouble upon them. But the sea grew even more violent against them. Their efforts were futile. Realizing they had no other choice if they were to survive, they prayed to Jonah's God, asking not to perish for taking this man's life and not to be held accountable for shedding innocent blood. Then, with heavy hearts, they took Jonah and hurled him into the raging sea. And instantly, the sea ceased its fury. The storm stopped. As Jonah sank beneath the waves, he must have thought this was the end, drowning in the tumultuous sea, a just punishment for his rebellion. But God's plans are often surprising, his mercy appearing in the most unexpected forms. The Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Can you picture it? Not a pleasant experience. Surely. Dark, confining, slimy, and reeking of the ocean's depths. It was an enforced isolation, a divine time out in the strangest of places. Far from the comforts of land, far from the path he had chosen, Jonah was utterly at God's mercy. In that dark, watery prison, Jonah did what he perhaps should have done much earlier. He prayed. His prayer, recorded in the book of Jonah, is one of profound desperation, repentance, and ultimately renewed faith. "In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. He acknowledged God's sovereign power, the one who had cast him into the deep, into the very heart of the seas. He realized that salvation comes from the Lord alone. It's often in our darkest moments when we feel we've hit rock bottom that our prayers become most honest and our reliance on God most complete. This was not a prayer for escape from the fish, but a prayer of thanksgiving for being saved from drowning, a prayer acknowledging God's authority, even in the abyss. He remembered God's holy temple and vowed to fulfill what he had promised. It was a turning point. In the suffocating darkness, a light of understanding began to dawn in Jonah's heart. His 3 days and nights in the fish were a period of intense reflection and spiritual recalibration. He had run from God, but God had not abandoned him. Instead, he had provided a most unusual means of preservation and a unique opportunity for repentance. Section 6. A reluctant messenger. Nineveh's surprising repentance. After 3 days and 3 nights, a period symbolic of death and resurrection, the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. It was hardly a dignified arrival, but it was a second chance, a fresh start. Covered in seaweed and who knows what else, Jonah stood once more on solid ground, a man pulled from the brink. And then, the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message that I tell you. The mission hadn't changed. God's patience and purpose remained steadfast, even if his prophet had wavered. This time Jonah obeyed, perhaps still reluctantly, perhaps still with a measure of fear or resentment, but he went. He had learned a powerful lesson in the belly of the fish. You cannot successfully run from God's call. So Jonah set out and went to Nineveh. It was a vast city, described as a visit of 3 days. He entered the city, going a day's journey, and began to proclaim his stark message. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. It was a short sermon, blunt and to the point. No frills, no eloquent appeals, just a raw announcement of impending doom. He probably expected to be ignored, or worse, attacked. But then, something astonishing happened. The Ninevites believed God. From the greatest of them to the least, they took Jonah's warning seriously. Word reached the king of Nineveh, and he too responded with remarkable humility.